Good deal, bud.
Hello, my name is Jim Epler, and I hate Christmas, but this is my Christmas present. From my wife and a close friend, I'm about to tell you an incredible story that I'm sharing because we have to stop what's happening to our young children. I am also hoping this will help with closure. I had approximately 6 sessions with a therapist. Thank you, Kate. A few more when it hurts. Here we go. Timeline. At 1 year, 10 months old, my mother passed away at age 20 on October 12, 1969, of spinal meningitis. At 2 years old, 2 years, 10 months old, I found my father deceased of an apparent suicide on October 14, 1970, at the age of 24. Early 1970s, new neighbor moved in next door. He's a police officer. Grandmother befriends neighbor and looks at him as a father figure. My toddler years, also known as the grooming years. My grandmother encourages relationship with neighbor. My grandfather physically abused me. Told neighbor of grandfather's abuse. I was told we're going to work on that, Jim. Neighbor called grandmom and had me and my sister sent over to his house as soon as his wife and small children would leave. My sister was tickled so hard that she would wet herself and have to go home. That was when the fondling started and took place. August 24th, 1972, grandfather died. Is that what the neighbor meant by work on this? Approximately ages 8 to 16 years old, the sexual abuse took place at different locations, including both of his homes. Between the ages of 10 and 15 years old, he would take me to St. Margaret's School for these meetings. Sometimes I had to wait in the car, and other times I would go in. There were a few other boys. I knew 1 or 2 of them, and about 50 adult men. There were also a half a dozen other getaways, which included 1 to 2 night stays. He told me they were business trips. I didn't have a choice. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, he would mostly work a 1 to 9 shift at his hangar, and he would pick me up after school and take me there. This is where I believed I was drugged and raped on more than 1 occasion. He would insist in getting me a bottle of soda. When someone would show up, he would have me hide in his locker with his gear. There was one time that I decided I was going to end the abuse and had the gun in my hands, waiting for that locker door to open. Anxiety and fear took over. I lost my nerve and put the gun back. When he opened the door and looked at me, and then looked at the gun and realized the snap was open, from then on, he would set it on top of the locker before locking me in. April 10th, 1982, at 14 years old, I attempted to commit suicide. Between the ages of 15 and 16 years old, the sexual abuse stopped because I was old enough to get away. He approached me at my grandmother's and said he was talking with a therapist and wanted to know if I wanted to go talk to them also. I told him no. Boy, did I need help. 1996, I joined the Army to get away because he insisted on keeping in contact with me. I felt like I had to keep in contact with him for my family's safety. He would tell me he would check in on them. He had a key to our house. He insisted I'd give him the phone number to my new barracks in Fort Drum. He said that he didn't want to continue pestering my grandmother. Sounded like a threat to me with my previous encounters. From 12 to 24 years old, I received over 300 letters written by him. I found them while cleaning out my deceased grandmother's house. I still have them. I also still have all the journals my grandmother wrote. Very hard for me to read. December 1987, discharged from the military, moved back to my grandmother's and tried to start a normal life. Still trying to put this behind me. 1991, my family moved into our first home. He continued to force his way into my life. Between 93 and 94, he invited me and my wife to Camp Cadet for lunch. After that visit, I knew I had to report him to keep him from the kids. Between 93 and 95, I reported the abuse to the Exeter Police Department. Never received a report, ever. The day after the report, Trooper Snyder and another officer showed up at my house. I was asked, "What do you want us to do?" My reply was, "I want him prosecuted, kept away from the kids, and him to leave me alone." The very next day, he showed up at my house. I was an 11-year-old kid that day again. Next section is control into childhood, or control into adulthood, 23 years, early 90s. He called me from across the street from my new house, waving, saying, "Can you see me?" I looked out my window, and there he stood at an old POW building located on the Reading Airport property he was going to be renting for the Toys for Tots program. Still keeping that thumb on me. He would stop at my house unannounced and make numerous phone calls. He showed up knocking on my door. I chose not to answer. My girls were toddlers, and he was standing outside for 20 minutes coaxing them to unlock the door. The slider bar was the only lock remaining since they could not reach it. He asked them to find a stool. I was 12 years old again. In the locker, my bedroom. And if he got in my house, he was going to be carried out. Thank God he never got in. He bought my Honda from me for a new young male friend. He stopped by my house to discuss the amount, and I felt compelled to ask him, "What are you doing with this young man?" He angrily barked. "What, do you think I'm some kind of monster?" Worse. He owned a 75th commemorative edition police revolver that he promised me as a child. On one of his many calls to me, I asked him for that gun, and he said I was going to save it for my grandson. I said, "You promised that gun to me." Within a week, I owned that gun without signing any paperwork. Illegal? Maybe, I don't know. Next section is flags, stuff that put fear in me. One night, I was in the locker at the barracks, and I'm fairly certain the visitor was Trooper Snowden by the voice. The two were in a heated argument. I don't know when, but a helicopter crashed thereafter. He took me to the Kenhurst barracks office, and I saw a picture of a boy, approximately ages 9 to 11 years old. I asked who he was, and he told me. We lost him a little while ago. I asked what happened. He said they didn't know. Really? A few times through the years, I tried to reach out and get someone to help me. There was one instant at the age of 12, I was riding bike with my friends, and we stopped at a store where there was a local uniformed police officer. At one point, I was alone and asking a few questions about his motorcycle and his job. I asked him if he liked being a cop. He replied yes. I asked, "What do you do if there are bad cops?" He snapped, "There are no such thing as bad cops." I give up. January 26, 1985. One entry that stands out in one of my grandmother's journals is an account of this day. I was having a particularly bad day. I was in a rage, insisted to my grandmother to call the police on me. The police came, brought my grandmother back to me, and left. I mentioned child abuse to her in regards to this man. Nothing changed. Help. Who was the police officer that night? To his family, in regards to the Roger Whittaker Christmas album, you are his tiny angels, but I am all that he wanted for Christmas. Protect your tiny angels. In closing, I am really trying to protect future generations from what I believe is a pedophile organization. It took me until now to read the letters and delve into my grandmother's journals, and yet still so much more needs to be said. I hope this falls on the right ears and a proper investigation takes place. I would like to apologize to Mike and Ken. I was hoping you might be able to get the right people involved, especially to Michelle and my wife, Michelle, for the times I couldn't control my rage. I would like to thank everyone who helped me out along the way,
and hope for a whole lot more thank yous to give.